Now, the good Dr. Ron Paul was on Larry King Live this week to discuss various issues of importance, and he was on there with other panelists, including Ben Stein, and talk about the underwear bomber in Detroit came up, and Ben Stein demonstrated what happens when you start criticizing American foreign policy in this country and bringing up the idea that possibly terrorists don't hate us because of our freedom, they hate us because we haphazardly lob missiles at them and kill innocent civilians and occupy their country.
I do. The one thing that is missing here is never asking the question, what is the motive? Mutula Magala, you know, he said why he was he did it. He said it because we bombed Yemen 2 weeks ago. That was his motive. Osama bin Laden said that he has a plan for America. First, he wants to bog us down in the Middle East in a no-win war. He wants to bankrupt this country, demoralize us, as well as have us do things that motivate people to join his radical movement. It seems like we have fallen into his trap, and if we only, you know, why is it off base? Today, when the gentleman indicated that he did it because of the bombing, you know what the administration said? They dismissed it. It can't possibly be so. If you dismiss motivations for why they hate us, we can never resolve this. There's hate on both sides, but you have to ask the question, why do they hate? And they usually come up with a reason, and we're foolish not to take that into consideration.
Ben?
Well, I've never heard anything quite like that in my whole life. What he's saying basically is we are doing something wrong by defending ourselves. Look, if these terrorists are trying to kill the government of Yemen, we've got to help defend them. They're our friends. We can't just let Al-Qaeda run wild. If we try to stop them, that's not sufficient provocation. Why should we stop them?
Why?
Because they're terrorists and murderers, and they're very anti-American.
Why are they
should
terrorists?
We stop terrorists and murderers?
Well,
surely,
Larry,
Congressman, what do you think they're
why are they terrorists?
They're terrorists and murderers because they're psychos. They're terrorists and murderers.
They're terrorists because we're occupiers.
And murders. But we,
no,
we're not occupiers. That's the same anti-Semitic argument we've heard over and over again. No, that's the same anti-Semitic argument we've heard over and over and over again.
Attack.
Look,
Larry, I think
one at a time, guys.
It's not a vicious attack.
That is, Larry, I'd like to.
Now, our last story this week was written by John Pilger, a personal hero of mine. He was fighting against tyranny and oppression in other countries long before I was born. If you've never heard of him, you should Google his name. A lot of his movies come up on Google Video, like Year Zero, where he chronicled how Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon's madman strategy of war and bombing the bejesus out of Cambodia as part of their Vietnam offensive and destroying millions of lives, how that led to the rise of Pol Pot and all the Holocaust that went on there. Another good movie is Stealing a Nation. It's about how people in this island in the Indian Ocean were relocated after the U.S. wanted to occupy their island to build a base there. They were relocated to another island and lived in poverty for the rest of their lives. You know, horrible details about how their pets were gassed as a threat to them if they didn't move. So definitely Google his name and check out his stuff. But we have this article. It was on Prison Planet and originally on John Pilger's own webpage, written on December 31st. It's titled, Welcome to Orwell's World 2010. In 1984, George Orwell described a superstate called Oceania, whose language of war inverted lies that passed into history and became truth. Who controls the past, ran the party slogan, controls the future. Who controls the present, controls the past. Barack Obama is the leader of a contemporary Oceania. In two speeches at the close of the decade, the Nobel Peace Prize winner affirmed that peace was no longer peace, but rather a permanent war that extends well beyond Afghanistan and Pakistan to disorderly regions and diffuse enemies. He called this global security and invited our gratitude. To the people of Afghanistan, which America has invaded and occupied, he said wittily, we have no interest in occupying your country. In Oceania, truth and lies are indivisible. According to Obama, the American attack on Afghanistan in 2001 was authorized by the United Nations Security Council. There was no UN authority. He said that the world supported the invasion in the wake of 9/11 when, in truth, all but 3 of 37 countries surveyed by Gallup expressed overwhelming opposition. He said that America invaded Afghanistan only after the Taliban refused to turn over Osama bin Laden in 2001. The Taliban tried 3 times to hand over bin Laden for trial, reported Pakistan's military regime, and were ignored. Even Obama's mystification of 9/11 as justification for his war is false. More than 2 months before the Twin Towers were attacked, the Pakistani Foreign Minister Niaz Naik was told by the Bush administration that an American military assault would take place by mid-October. The Taliban regime in Kabul, which the Clinton administration had secretly supported, was no longer regarded as stable enough to ensure America's control over oil and gas pipelines to the Caspian Sea. It had to go. Obama's most audacious lie is that Afghanistan today is a safe haven for al-Qaeda's attacks on the West. His own National Security Advisor, General James Jones, said in October that there were fewer than 100 al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. According to U.S. intelligence, 90% of the Taliban are hardly Taliban at all, but a tribal, localized insurgency who see themselves as opposing the U.S. because it is an occupying power. The war is a fraud. Only the terminally gormless remain true to the Obama brand of world peace. Beneath the surface, however, there is a serious purpose. Under the disturbing General Stanley McChrystal, who gained distinction for his assassination squads in Iraq, the occupation of one of the most impoverished countries is a model for those disorderly regions of the world still beyond Oceania's reach. This is known as COIN, or Counterinsurgency Network, which draws together the military aid organizations, psychologists, anthropologists, the media, and public relations hirelings. Covered in jargon about winning hearts and minds, its aim is to pit one ethnic group against another and incite civil war. Tajiks and Uzbeks against Pashtuns. The Americans did this in Iraq and destroyed a multi-ethnic society. They bribed and built walls between communities who had once intermarried, ethnically cleansing the Sunni and driving millions out of the country. The embedded media reported this as peace, and American academics bought by Washington and security experts briefed by the Pentagon appeared on the BBC to spread the good news. As in 1984, the opposite was true. Something similar is planned for Afghanistan. People are to be forced into target areas controlled by warlords bankrolled by the Americans and the opium trade. That these warlords are infamous for their barbarism is irrelevant. We can live with that, a Clinton-era diplomat said of the persecution of women in a stable Taliban-run Afghanistan. Favored Western relief agencies, engineers, and agricultural specialists will attend to the humanitarian crisis, and so secure the subjugated tribal lands. That is the theory. It worked after a fashion in Yugoslavia where the ethnic sectarian partition wiped out a once peaceful society, but it failed in Vietnam where the CIA's strategic Hamlet program was designed to corral and divide the southern population and so defeat the Viet Cong, the Americans' catch-all term for the resistance similar to the Taliban. Behind much of this are the Israelis who have long advised the Americans in both the Iraq and Afghanistan adventures. Ethnic cleansing, wall building, checkpoints, collective punishment, and constant surveillance. These are claimed as Israeli innovations that have succeeded in stealing most of Palestine from its native people. And yet, for all their suffering, the Palestinians have not been divided irrevocably, and they endure as a nation against all odds. The most telling forerunners of the Obama plan, which the Nobel Peace Prize winner and his strange general and his PR men prefer we forget, are those that failed in Afghanistan itself. The British in the 19th century and the Soviets in the 20th century attempted to conquer that wild country by ethnic cleansing and were seen off, though after terrible bloodshed. Imperial cemeteries are their memorials. People power, sometimes baffling, often heroic, remains the seed beneath the snow, and invaders fear it. It was curious, wrote Orwell in 1984, to think that the sky was the same for everybody, in Eurasia and East Asia as well as here. And the people under the sky were also very much the same, everywhere, all over the world. And people ignorant of one another's existence, held apart by walls of hatred and lies, and yet almost exactly the same people who were storing up in their hearts and bellies and muscles the power that would one day overturn the world. This is going to conclude another episode of the America 20XY Week in Review. Remember, folks, Eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. God bless you, and God bless America. Good night.